The first people to live beside the Nile River had no books. They had no schools. They had no clocks to tell them when to plant their crops. But every night, the sky opened like a great map above them. Stars moved in patterns across the darkness. The moon grew fat and thin again. These ancient souls watched and wondered. They had nothing but their eyes and their memory to understand the world. They noticed the same bright lights return to the same places. One star shone brighter than all others in the east, just before dawn. When it appeared, the river began to swell. Water flooded the dry fields. Life returned to the land. This star became their teacher. They called it Sopdet. We call it Sirius today. Without this star, they would not know when the flood was coming. The people carved marks on stones to remember what they saw. Simple circles for the sun, dots for stars, lines connecting light to light. These were not just pretty pictures. They were survival maps written in the language of the heavens. If they read the sky wrong, crops would fail. Children would go hungry. Families would suffer through the dry season with empty hands and empty bellies. Generations passed their sky knowledge from parent to child. Grandmothers pointed upward and told stories. Grandfathers traced invisible shapes between the stars. A hunter here, a bull there, a boat sailing across the dark river of night. Each story held a truth about when to plant, when to harvest, when to prepare for the flood. The stories were not just entertainment, they were lessons wrapped in wonder, but something deeper stirred in their hearts. The stars never changed their paths. Night after night, year after year, the lights danced in perfect order. While people grew old and died, while kingdoms rose and crumbled, the stars remained. This scared them. It also gave them hope. Perhaps there was an eternal order beyond human chaos. Perhaps something greater than humans controlled the universe. The earliest Egyptians built their first temples facing the eastern horizon. They wanted to greet that bright star when it returned. They wanted to say thank you to the sky for teaching them the rhythms of life. In those simple stone rooms, the first prayers to celestial gods were whispered. The stars had become more than lights. They had become watchers, guides, and something to fear. As decades passed, their observations grew more detailed. They noticed clusters of stars that moved together. They saw planets wandering between the fixed stars. They tracked the moon through its monthly journey. Each discovery added to their understanding. But each discovery also added to their questions. Why did the sky move this way? Who commanded the stars to march in such perfect lines? The night sky became their first library. Every constellation told a story. Every star position marked a date. The brightest stars had names and personalities. Some were friendly helpers. Others were dangerous spirits to avoid. The Egyptians began to see the sky not as empty darkness, but as a crowded realm filled with powerful beings who controlled their fate from above. Along the Nile, villages grew into towns. Towns grew into cities. Each settlement needed water, food, and protection. But the Egyptians built something else into their cities too. They built sightlines to the stars. The streets pointed towards certain rising points on the horizon. The tallest buildings faced specific directions. These were not accidents. Every angle was measured. Every alignment was intentional. In the city of Heliopolis, priests studied the sun and stars every day. They created the first calendars by watching the heavens. 365 days in a year, 12 months, each month named for what appeared in the sky. The whole city became a giant clock, telling time by shadow and starlight. People travelled from distant lands to learn from these sky watchers. Knowledge was power, and the priests of Heliopolis held the keys to time itself. Another city called Abydos held deep mysteries. Its temples aligned with the stars of Orion's belt. The Egyptians saw these three bright stars as the home of Osiris, god of the afterlife. When kings died, their bodies were prepared to travel to Orion. The entire city pointed them toward their final destination. Even in death, the stars guided them home. The journey to the afterlife was not a vague hope, but a mapped route through the cosmos. Some cities vanished beneath the sand over thousands of years, but archaeologists digging in the desert find their ruins still pointing skyward. Foundation stones mark perfect north. Temple doors frame the rising sun on special days. Wall carvings show star maps and cosmic boats. The cities died, but their celestial purpose remained written in stone. Time buried the buildings, but could not erase their cosmic intentions. Why did they build this way? The Egyptians believed the gods lived in the sky. To please these gods, temples had to mirror heaven on earth. If a temple matched the pattern of stars, it became a doorway between worlds. Priests could speak to gods. Pharaohs could gain cosmic power. The city itself became holy ground. Architecture was not just about shelter. It was about connection to the divine. But there was fear too. If the stars controlled floods, seasons, and harvests, they controlled everything. A city misaligned with heaven might anger the gods. Disaster could follow. So every stone, every wall, every gate was placed with perfect care. The cities watched the sky, and they believed the sky watched back. In this eternal gaze, both wonder and terror lived side by side. The greatest architects were also astronomers. They studied for years before designing a single building. They measured the angles of sunrise on different days. They tracked where stars appeared on the horizon. They calculated where the moon would be in future years. Only then would they draw plans. A temple might take decades to build, but its alignment with the heavens would last forever. When a new city was founded, priests performed ceremonies under the stars. They marked the cardinal directions with wooden stakes. They waited for specific star positions before laying the first stone. The founding moment had to match a celestial event. This way, the city was born under lucky stars. It carried cosmic blessing from its first breath. The Egyptians built their world to match the patterns they saw above. The Egyptians needed a way to record their sky knowledge. Speaking stories worked for a while, but memories fade. People forget details, so they invented a language that could last forever. They carved symbols into stone. These marks were not random scratches. Each one held meaning. Each one connected Earth to the eternal heavens above. The Ankh symbol looked like a cross with a loop on top. It meant life, but it also represented the sun rising over the horizon. The circle was the sun, the cross was the four directions of Earth. When priests held an Ankh toward the sky, they were asking the sun to give life to the land below. This simple shape contained a cosmic prayer carved in permanent stone. Another symbol showed a boat with a curved bottom. The Egyptians believed the sun god Ra sailed across the sky each day in a golden boat. At night, he travelled through the underworld in a different boat. This journey never stopped. The boat symbol reminded people that the cosmic cycle continued, whether they saw it or not. Day and night were two halves of one eternal voyage. The Eye of Horus appeared on temple walls throughout Egypt. This symbol showed a human eye with markings below it, but it meant much more than seeing. It represented the moon and its phases. The markings were fractions that added up to measure time. Priests used this symbol to calculate lunar months. Mathematics and mythology merged in one carved image. Stars themselves became symbols. A 5-pointed star meant a soul. When someone died, they became a star in the sky. Important people became brighter stars. Pharaohs became the brightest stars of all. Temple walls showed rows of stars representing the ancestors watching from above. Death was not an ending, but a transformation into eternal light. The scarab beetle pushing a ball appeared everywhere in Egyptian art. This represented the sun moving across the sky. The beetle pushed dung balls in real life. The Egyptians saw this and thought the sun must be pushed across the heavens by a giant cosmic beetle. They carved this symbol to honor the force that moved the sun. Even small creatures on earth reflected the mechanics of heaven. Hieroglyphs combined these symbols into complex messages. A temple wall might tell the story of a pharaoh's journey to the stars after death. It showed his body being prepared, his soul rising, his arrival at Orion, his transformation into eternal light. Every step was recorded in symbols that would outlast human memory. Stone remembered what flesh forgot. These carvings were not decoration. They were instruction manuals for the afterlife. They were maps of the cosmos. They were permanent records of celestial patterns. When modern archaeologists find these symbols, they are reading the fears and hopes of people who looked at the same sky we see tonight. The symbols bridge thousands of years. They speak across time in a language written in stone and starlight. The pharaohs left behind more than buildings. They left tools, objects, instruments designed to measure and track the heavens. These items were not toys. They were sacred technology. Each one served a purpose in the eternal conversation between earth and sky. When archaeologists find these objects in tombs and temples, they hold devices that once measured infinity. The merket was a simple tool made from a palm rib and a plumb line. It looked like a small wooden ruler with a weight hanging from string. But this device could measure the exact north-south line by watching stars. Priests used it to align temples perfectly. 2 priests would work together at night, one holding the merket, the other marking positions. They turned temple construction into a form of cosmic mathematics written in stone and starlight. Star clocks appeared on coffin lids and temple ceilings. These were not clocks as we know them. They were charts showing which stars appeared at which hours of the night during different seasons. 36 different stars, or star groups, divided the night into segments. Priests watching these stars could tell time without any mechanical device. The sky itself became a great celestial timepiece that never needed winding. The oldest complete star clock was found on the coffin lid of a man named Idi. It dates to around 2,100 years before the Common Era. This chart showed the positions of decan stars throughout the year. Decans were groups of stars that rose just before sunrise in 10-day periods. By tracking decans, Egyptians created a calendar of 36 10-day weeks. Mathematics, astronomy, and religion merged into one functional system. Sun temples contained special chambers where light entered only on specific days: the summer solstice, the winter solstice, the spring equinox. These were not windows but precisely calculated openings. On the correct day, at the correct hour, sunlight would illuminate a particular statue or altar. The temple became a giant sundial marking the year's most important moments. Architecture transformed into a tool for measuring cosmic time. Water clocks called clepsydras measured time when stars were hidden by clouds. These were stone bowls with a small hole in the bottom. Water dripped out at a steady rate. Marks inside the bowl showed how many hours had passed. But even these simple timekeepers connected to the stars. The hours they measured matched the star hours observed at night. Every tool the Egyptians created referenced the celestial order above. Royal tombs contained golden models of the cosmos. Small spheres represented planets. Metal arcs showed star paths. These were teaching tools and prayer objects combined. A pharaoh might hold a model of the sky while priests recited stellar coordinates. The object helped the king memorize his route to the afterlife. When buried with him, it served as a map for his soul's journey through the darkness between death and rebirth among the stars. The most mysterious object ever found was the Dendera zodiac. This circular stone carving showed all the constellations the Egyptians knew. It mapped the entire visible sky in one image. Scholars still debate its exact meaning and age, but clearly someone invested enormous effort to create a permanent record of the heavens. The stone still exists today, a cosmic map carved by hands that turned to dust thousands of years ago. The Old Kingdom began around 2,600 years before the Common Era. This was when Egypt became truly great. Pharaohs ruled over a united land. They commanded thousands of workers. They built monuments that still stand today. But their power did not come from armies alone. It came from their connection to the stars. The pharaohs claimed to rule because the heavens approved. Every pharaoh took a throne name that connected him to Ra, the sun god. Names like Khafra, Menkaura, and Khufu all contained Ra's name. This was not just tradition. It was a statement of cosmic authority. The pharaoh was the sun's representative on earth. When he spoke, the voice of Ra spoke through him. When he commanded, the power of the stars moved his words into action. The pyramids of Giza rose during this period. 3 massive structures aligned with incredible precision. The Great Pyramid faces true north with an error of only 3/60ths of a single degree. No modern compass existed then. The builders used stars to achieve this accuracy. They watched circumpolar stars that never set below the horizon. These stars circled the North Celestial Pole. By tracking them carefully, the builders found true north. But the pyramids held a deeper stellar secret. The 3 pyramids matched the 3 stars of Orion's belt in size and position. The smallest pyramid is slightly offset from the line formed by the other 2. This exact pattern appears in Orion. The pyramids were not just tombs. They were a map of heaven built on earth. When a pharaoh died, his soul would recognize this pattern and know where to go. Inside the Great Pyramid, narrow shafts point from the burial chamber towards specific stars. One shaft aimed at Thuban, the North Star of that era. Another pointed toward Orion's belt. These were not ventilation shafts, as some people once thought. They were soul highways, passages for the deceased pharaoh's spirit to travel directly to its stellar destination. Architecture became a launch pad for the afterlife journey. The Old Kingdom lasted for about 500 years. During this time, the connection between pharaohs and stars grew stronger. Each new pyramid, each new temple, each new monument referenced celestial patterns. The entire landscape of Egypt transformed into a cosmic diagram. The desert became a reflection of the night sky. Heaven and earth merged through careful planning and absolute belief. But then something changed. The Old Kingdom collapsed. The central government fell apart. Egypt divided into competing regions. Scholars debate why this happened. Some point to drought. Others suggest political corruption. But ancient texts hint at something else. They speak of the stars moving differently, of cosmic signs that worried the priests. Perhaps the eternal order they trusted so completely showed a crack. When the Middle Kingdom rose centuries later, the new pharaohs still built according to the stars. But their buildings were smaller, their claims more modest. The absolute confidence of the Old Kingdom never fully returned. They had learned a hard lesson. The stars guided them. The stars blessed them. But the stars did not guarantee success. Even under the watchful eyes of the eternal heavens, empires could fall. The Egyptians told stories about the night sky. These were not just bedtime tales. They were sacred myths that explained how the universe worked. Each story taught a lesson about the cosmic order. Each god and goddess represented a force in nature. Understanding the myths meant understanding the stars themselves and the powers they held over human destiny. Nut was the sky goddess. Artists painted her body arched over the earth, covered in stars. She swallowed the sun each evening and gave birth to it each morning. This myth explained the daily solar cycle in human terms, but it also revealed Egyptian fears. What if Nut stopped giving birth to the sun? What if one morning darkness remained? The myth was beautiful, but underneath lay existential terror. Ra, the sun god, sailed across the sky in his golden boat during the day. At sunset he entered the underworld. There he fought the serpent Apep, who tried to stop the sun from rising again. Every night was a cosmic battle. Every sunrise was a victory. Priests performed rituals at dawn to help Ra defeat the serpent. They believed their prayers actually helped the sun rise. If they failed, darkness might win forever. Osiris ruled the stars of Orion. His story was more complex. His brother Set murdered him out of jealousy. Set cut Osiris into 14 pieces and scattered them across Egypt. Isis, the faithful wife, searched until she found every piece. She reassembled her husband. He could not return to life on earth, so he became lord of the afterlife among the stars. This myth explained death and resurrection through celestial geography. The star Sirius belonged to Isis. When Sirius rose just before dawn, after 70 days of invisibility, it signaled the Nile flood. The Egyptians said Isis was weeping for her dead husband, Osiris. Her tears caused the river to swell. Science tells us the flood came from distant rains, but the myth gave meaning to the mechanism. The stars were not just cosmic clockwork. They had emotions, motivations, and personal histories. Thoth was the god of wisdom and the moon. He measured time and recorded everything. He invented writing and mathematics. When the moon grew full, Thoth was strong. When the moon disappeared, Thoth was resting. The lunar cycle became a story about a god who worked hard, then needed rest. This made the phases of the moon memorable and meaningful. Children learning lunar phases learned them as episodes in Thoth's monthly journey. The goddess Hathor sometimes merged with Sekhmet, the destroyer. Myths warned that if humans angered the gods, Hathor would transform into Sekhmet and destroy humanity. Only beer mixed with red dye could trick her into stopping. This strange story might reference a celestial event, perhaps a red comet or blood moon that appeared during a disaster. The myth preserved the memory of cosmic trauma in narrative form. These myths were not seen as fiction. They were truth wrapped in story. The Egyptians saw these dramas playing out in the sky every night. When stars moved, gods were traveling. When planets wandered, gods were searching for something. The night sky was not empty space, but a crowded stage where divine beings acted out eternal dramas that controlled everything below. Egypt did not stand alone. Other civilizations watched the same sky. They saw the same stars, but they told different stories about what those lights meant. When traders traveled between lands, they carried more than goods. They carried ideas about the cosmos. Star knowledge spread across the ancient world like seeds scattered by wind, taking root in different soils. To the east, in Mesopotamia, the Babylonians tracked planets with incredible precision. They called planets wandering stars because they moved against the background of fixed constellations. The Babylonians named 5 planets after their gods. These names travelled west. The Greeks adopted them. Eventually they reached Egypt. The Egyptian priests recognized the same wandering lights, but saw them through their own mythological lens. The Babylonians divided the sky into 12 sections. Each section was marked by a constellation the sun passed through during the year. This became the zodiac. The idea fascinated Egyptian astronomers. They already had their own star groups, but this 12-part system offered a new way to organize celestial time. They adapted it, blending Babylonian concepts with Egyptian gods. The sky became a meeting place where different cultures mixed their cosmic visions. South of Egypt lay Nubia, a kingdom often at war with its northern neighbour. But the Nubians also watched the stars. They built pyramids steeper than Egyptian ones. They oriented their temples to celestial markers. When Egyptian and Nubian priests met, they discovered they feared similar cosmic events. Both cultures worried about eclipses. Both saw comets as warnings. Shared fear of the sky created a strange bond between rivals. Across the Mediterranean, the Greeks were developing their own astronomy. They were more interested in mathematics and geometry than myths. Greek scholars wanted to calculate star positions, not just observe them. When Alexander the Great conquered Egypt in 332 years before the Common Era, Greek and Egyptian knowledge merged. The Great Library of Alexandria became a place where different star traditions met and mixed. The Phoenicians were master sailors. They navigated by stars because they had no other guides on the open sea. They knew which stars marked north. They knew which constellations rose at different seasons. Egyptian traders learned navigation techniques from Phoenician sailors. In return, Egyptians shared their calendar system. The exchange was practical. Both civilizations needed accurate star knowledge to survive, though they used it for different purposes. Even distant lands contributed to cosmic understanding. India developed complex mathematics for tracking planetary movements. China recorded comets and supernovae with meticulous detail. Some of this knowledge traveled along trade routes, carried by merchants who probably didn't understand the significance of what they shared. A casual conversation in a marketplace could transmit an idea that changed how an entire civilization viewed the heavens. What becomes clear is that ancient peoples all looked up with the same questions. Why do the stars move in patterns? What do eclipses mean? Why do some stars wander while others stay fixed? Different cultures created different answers, but the questions were universal. The sky above connected humanity in a shared sense of wonder and a shared sense of cosmic unease about forces beyond human control. The ancient Egyptians noticed something remarkable about certain stars. While most stars rose and set like the sun, some stars never disappeared below the horizon. They circled around a fixed point in the northern sky. These were the imperishable stars, the ones that never died. The Egyptians saw them as eternal watchers, gods who never slept, never rested, never left their posts in the cosmic order. The north celestial pole was the pivot point of heaven. All the imperishable stars rotated around this invisible spot. The Egyptians called this region the indestructible realm. It was where souls went if they were pure enough. Regular stars rose and set, experiencing a kind of daily death and rebirth. But the imperishable stars lived forever in continuous existence. This distinction was not just astronomy. It was theology written in stellar motion. One star circled very close to the North Pole during the Pyramid Age. We call it Thuban today. The Egyptians saw it as a nail holding the sky in place. If that nail came loose, the entire cosmic tent would collapse. Temples were aligned to Thuban. Pyramid shafts pointed toward it. The star represented stability in an ever-changing world. But the Egyptians would eventually discover a disturbing truth about even this most reliable star. South of Egypt, in the region of the celestial equator, Orion rose and set each night. This constellation became the most important stellar pattern in Egyptian religion. 3 bright stars formed Orion's belt. The Egyptians called this pattern Sa and associated it with Osiris. Below the belt, fainter stars represented the god's legs. Above it, brighter stars formed his shoulders and head. The whole human-like shape walked across the sky each night. Just before Orion rose, another star appeared, Sirius, the brightest star in the entire sky. The Egyptians called it Sopdet and linked it to Isis, wife of Osiris. The relationship was clear. Isis followed her husband across the heavens just as the goddess followed Osiris in myth. When Sirius disappeared from view for 70 days each year, the Egyptians said Isis was mourning. When it returned, rising just before dawn, the Nile flood began. Mythology and observable fact merged perfectly. The Milky Way stretched across the sky like a river of stars. The Egyptians saw it as a celestial version of the Nile. The sky river flowed through the land of stars, just as the earthly river flowed through Egypt. Souls of the dead travelled on boats along this stellar waterway. The cosmic geography mirrored earthly geography. Understanding one helped navigate the other. The patterns above taught lessons about the world below. Planets moved through this stellar landscape like wandering gods. Venus appeared as both morning and evening star, so bright it cast shadows. The Egyptians tracked its movements carefully. Mars glowed red like blood, an ominous presence. Jupiter moved with steady brightness. Saturn crept slowly through the constellations. Mercury darted near the Sun, hard to see but significant when spotted. Each planet had personality, trajectory, and meaning encoded in its wandering path. But the patterns were not as permanent as they seemed. Over very long periods, the stars shifted positions slightly. The north celestial pole moved. Thuban stopped being the pole star. Other stars took its place over thousands of years. This phenomenon is called precession. The Egyptians may have noticed it. Some scholars think they did. If so, they discovered that even the eternal patterns eventually change. Nothing, not even the imperishable stars, was truly permanent. This knowledge would have been terrifying. The Egyptians believed invisible forces flowed from the stars down to Earth. These were not just light rays, they were threads of power, influence, and destiny. When a child was born under certain stars, those stars shaped the child's entire life. When a pharaoh was crowned under specific celestial conditions, those conditions determined his reign. The sky pressed down on Earth with weight no one could see, but everyone could feel. This force had a name, Heka. We might translate it as magic, but that misses the meaning. Heka was natural law. It was the energy that made the universe function. The stars channeled Heka down to Earth. The sun was the greatest source, but every star contributed its portion. The night sky was not empty darkness. It was a crowded network of power lines connecting heaven to earth, pulsing with cosmic energy. Priests studied how to work with Heka. They learned which stars to call upon for different needs. A sick person needed healing energy from certain constellations. A farmer needed growth energy from others. A pharaoh needed authority energy from the most powerful stars. Rituals were performed at precise times when specific stars occupied exact positions. Timing was everything. The same ritual performed under different stars produced different results or no results at all. Temples were designed as Heka-focusing machines. The precise alignment with stars was not just symbolic. Egyptians believed celestial energy flowed more strongly along these alignment paths. When Sirius rose in line with a temple doorway, Heka flooded through that opening. Priests standing in the right position at the right moment could channel this energy for healing, blessing, or prophecy. Architecture became a tool for manipulating invisible cosmic forces. The Egyptians noticed that celestial events coincided with earthly changes. When certain stars appeared, the Nile flooded. When planets aligned, wars began. When eclipses occurred, pharaohs died. They saw cause and effect. The stars did not merely predict events. The stars caused events. The celestial realm was not separate from the earthly realm. They were one system. Changes above created changes below through the mechanism of Heka flowing between them. But Heka could be dangerous. Just as starlight could heal, it could harm. Dark stars existed alongside bright ones. Some constellations brought disease. Some stellar configurations weakened rather than strengthened. Priests had to know which stars to invoke and which to avoid. Protective amulets featured helpful star symbols. Curses invoked harmful stellar forces. The cosmic network was powerful, and power always carries danger for those who use it incorrectly. Modern science might call this primitive superstition, but the Egyptians were observing something real. Stars do affect Earth. Solar radiation influences climate. Cosmic rays impact the planet. The moon controls tides. The Egyptians sensed these influences without instruments to measure them. They created a framework to understand forces they could feel, but not see. Heka was their science, expressed in religious language because they had no other vocabulary available. The deepest secret of Heka was its connection to consciousness. The Egyptians believed human thoughts could interact with stellar forces. A prayer spoken under the right stars had power. An offering made at the correct celestial moment created real effects. This was not wishful thinking in their world view. It was physics. The universe was alive, conscious, and responsive. The hidden forces flowed both ways, from stars to Earth, and from Earth to stars, creating a cosmic conversation in which humans played an active role. Modern astronomers have studied ancient Egyptian texts. They have measured the pyramids. They have calculated star positions for dates thousands of years ago. What they discovered is surprising. The Egyptians were often scientifically correct, even when their explanations were mythological. Underneath the stories of gods and magic lay genuine astronomical knowledge that worked, whether or not the gods were real. Sirius really does signal the Nile flood. The star's heliacal rising its first appearance just before dawn, after weeks of invisibility, coincided with the annual inundation. This was not magic, it was the calendar. Sirius appeared at that time because of Earth's orbit around the Sun. The flood came because of distant rainfall in the African highlands. But the correlation was real. Egyptian priests who watched for Sirius could predict the flood with accuracy. Their method worked even if their explanation involved divine tears. The pyramids do align with incredible precision to true north. Scientists using modern instruments confirm the Great Pyramid faces north within a tiny fraction of a degree. No magnetic compass existed in ancient times. The builders had to use astronomical methods. They probably observed circumpolar stars and calculated the true north from their circular paths. The technique was sophisticated. The results were accurate. The religious motivation did not diminish the scientific achievement. The pyramid shafts really do point towards significant stars. In the Pyramid Age, around 2,500 years before the Common Era, one shaft aimed at Thuban, the North Pole star. Another pointed toward the three stars of Orion's belt. Computer programs can recreate the ancient sky. They confirm these alignments were intentional and precise. The Egyptians built with astronomical knowledge, even if they believed they were building stairways for royal souls to climb to heaven. Eclipses frightened the Egyptians terribly. They saw the sun being swallowed by a serpent or the moon turning blood red. Modern science explains eclipses through celestial mechanics. But the ancient fear was not entirely irrational. Eclipses are dramatic events. Sudden darkness during day, blood moon at night. Without understanding the cause, terror makes sense. Some ancient records suggest Egyptians eventually learned to predict eclipses. That would mean they understood the cycles, even without understanding the mechanism. The precession of the equinoxes puzzled ancient astronomers. This is the slow wobble of Earth's axis over 26,000 years. It causes the north celestial pole to shift over millennia. Thuban was the pole star in the Pyramid Age. Today, Polaris is the pole star. Eventually, Vega will become the pole star. Some scholars believe sophisticated Egyptian astronomers noticed this change. If they did, they would have realized the eternal patterns were not eternal. The cosmic order itself was slowly transforming. This discovery would shake the foundation of their worldview. The Egyptian calendar was based on careful observation. 365 days in a year. 12 months of 30 days each, plus 5 extra days. This is remarkably close to the true solar year of 365 and 1/4 days. Over centuries, the small error accumulated. The seasons drifted out of alignment with the calendar months. But the original calculation showed real astronomical skill. They measured the year by watching the sun and stars with nothing but their eyes and their patience. What emerges is a picture of ancient people who observed carefully, remembered accurately, and drew reasonable conclusions from what they saw. They wrapped their science in mythology because that was their cultural framework. But the observations underneath were valid. When we strip away the gods and the magic, we find genuine astronomy. The Egyptians knew the sky not because of supernatural gifts, but because they paid attention night after night, generation after generation, accumulating knowledge star by star. History does not move in a straight line. It circles back on itself. Ideas from one age reappear in another. The story of Egyptian sky watching spans thousands of years. Let us trace the timeline and see how star knowledge grew, changed, and sometimes was forgotten before being rediscovered. Each period added something new while building on what came before. Around 3,000 years before the Common Era, the earliest dynasties formed. Egypt united under the first pharaohs. Even then, they aligned buildings to celestial markers. Simple temples faced east to greet the rising sun. Tombs pointed north toward the imperishable stars. The tradition was already ancient when history began to be written down. These earliest builders passed their techniques to the Pyramid Age that followed. The Old Kingdom, from 2,600 to 2,200 years before the Common Era, was the golden age of celestial architecture. The Great Pyramids rose at Giza. Temples grew larger and more precisely aligned. Star shafts were built into royal tombs. This period represents the peak of confidence. Pharaohs believed absolutely in their cosmic connection. They built monuments meant to last forever because they thought their stellar system was eternal and unchanging. Then came the first intermediate period, when the kingdom fell apart. For over a century, chaos ruled Egypt. Rival kings fought for power. Buildings stopped. Knowledge became fragmented. But the sky remained. Local priests kept watching the stars, even when the central government collapsed. They maintained the calendars. They tracked Sirius. They preserved what they knew through the dark times. Knowledge survived in scattered temple schools across a divided land. The Middle Kingdom rose around 2,000 years before the Common Era. New pharaohs reunited Egypt. They built again, though never quite matching the scale of the Old Kingdom. But they added something new. More detailed star clocks appeared in tombs. Mathematical astronomy advanced. The calendar improved. This period shows adaptation. They learned from the past, but also innovated. The cosmic system was refined based on centuries of accumulated observation. Another collapse came. The Second Intermediate Period brought foreign rulers. The Hyksos invaded from the northeast. They controlled parts of Egypt for 100 years. During this time, Egyptian and foreign astronomy mixed. The Hyksos brought different star traditions. Some influenced Egyptian thinking. When native pharaohs finally drove out the invaders, Egyptian astronomy emerged, slightly changed, enriched by contact with foreign knowledge. The New Kingdom lasted from 1,500 to 1,000 years before the Common Era. This was Egypt's imperial age. Armies conquered neighboring lands. Trade routes stretched to distant kingdoms. With this expansion came exposure to Babylonian astronomy, which was highly developed. Egyptian priests began adopting zodiac concepts. The pure Egyptian star system started blending with international astronomical traditions. The night sky became a place where cultures met and mixed their cosmic visions. Decline came slowly. Foreign powers grew stronger. Egypt was conquered by Persians, then Greeks, then Romans. Each conquest brought new ideas about the stars. By the time Alexander the Great arrived in 332 years before the Common Era, Greek astronomy was merging with Egyptian tradition. The Great Library of Alexandria became a meeting place for star watchers from across the known world. Egyptian knowledge did not die. It transformed, blending into a wider Mediterranean astronomical culture that would eventually influence medieval Islamic scholars and Renaissance European astronomers. The line continues even to our time, connecting ancient Nile watchers to modern telescopes through an unbroken chain of human curiosity about the stars. When archaeologists measure Egyptian monuments, they find alignments too precise to be accidental. Temples point towards solstice sunrises. Pyramids face true north within fractions of degrees. Star shafts aim at specific celestial coordinates. These are not rough approximations. They are exact architectural astronomy. But why? What did the Egyptians hope to achieve with such demanding precision? The answer reveals how they understood the relationship between earth and heaven. The most basic alignment was east-west. This marked the sun's path across the sky. Temples facing east captured the first light of dawn. The Egyptians believed the sun was born each morning. A temple door, aligned with sunrise, became a birth canal for the sun god Ra. When light flooded through the doorway into the inner sanctuary, Ra entered his earthly home. The building participated in daily cosmic renewal. Architecture became an active player in maintaining universal order. North-south alignment was more complex. True north was not marked by any bright star in the Pyramid Age. The builders had to find it through careful observation of circumpolar stars as they rotated around the north celestial pole. One method involved watching a star from the eastern horizon to the western horizon and calculating the midpoint. This required patience and mathematical skill, but finding true north meant finding the axis of cosmic rotation. The north-south line was the universe's spine, and monuments aligned with it connected to that central pillar of existence. The pyramids at Giza demonstrate multiple alignments working together. The base faces the cardinal directions with amazing accuracy. The sides slope at an angle that may encode mathematical constants. The dimensions ratio may represent the relationship between Earth's radius and circumference. Inside, the narrow shafts point towards stars significant in Egyptian religion. One aimed at Thuban, the North Pole star, representing eternity. Another pointed toward Orion's belt, representing Osiris and the afterlife. The entire structure was a three-dimensional star map carved in limestone. Some temples incorporated seasonal alignments. On the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, sunlight would penetrate deep into the temple through a series of doorways and illuminate a statue of the pharaoh in the innermost sanctuary. This happened only once a year, only on that specific day. The event declared the pharaoh's special relationship with the sun at its weakest moment. When the sun needed strength, it came to the pharaoh. When the pharaoh needed legitimacy, the sun provided proof through perfect alignment, visible to all who witnessed the annual miracle. The temple at Abu Simbel, built by Ramses II, provides the most dramatic example. Twice a year, on dates that may correspond to the pharaoh's birthday and coronation day, sunlight travels 60 meters into the mountain through the temple entrance. It illuminates 4 statues deep inside. 3 gods and the pharaoh himself shine in golden light while the surrounding darkness remains. The 4th statue, representing the underworld, stays in shadow. This event required calculating sun angles, designing precise doorway dimensions, and carving the entire temple into solid rock at exactly the right angle. The achievement represents astronomy, engineering, and royal propaganda merged into one monument. But alignment served more than symbolic purposes. The Egyptians believed cosmic forces flowed along alignment paths. A temple properly oriented could channel stellar energy more efficiently. Think of it like a radio antenna. Point it correctly and you receive a clear signal. Point it wrong and you get static. The temples were antennas for cosmic power. The prayers spoken inside had greater effect when the building itself resonated with celestial frequencies. Wrong alignment meant weak connection to the gods. Correct alignment meant strong divine presence and effective rituals. The deepest meaning of alignment was about creating order. The Egyptian word for universe was ma'at, which also meant truth, justice, and cosmic order. The opposite was isfet, which meant chaos. By aligning earthly architecture with celestial patterns, Egyptians were imposing ma'at on the physical world. They were making earth match heaven. They were fighting back chaos with geometry. Every precisely placed stone was a small victory over disorder. Every perfect alignment was a prayer carved in rock, asking the universe to maintain its patterns and hold back the darkness that surrounded the fragile order of existence. Egyptian art is filled with stars. Walk through any museum with Egyptian collections and you will see them. Gold stars on deep blue ceilings, star symbols on tomb walls, goddesses covered in celestial patterns. These images were not decoration. They were maps, instructions, and protective spells. The pictures in Egyptian art tell us what the Egyptians feared in the darkness and how they hoped to navigate through it. The goddess Nut appears countless times in tomb paintings. Her elongated body arches over the deceased, covered with stars. Her fingers and toes touch the horizon. She swallows the sun at dusk and gives birth to it at dawn. This image told the dead person what to expect. The soul would travel with the sun through Nut's body during the night. It was a dark journey through the belly of the sky goddess, but dawn would come. Rebirth was certain if one followed the correct path through the celestial realm. Star clocks on coffin lids show rows of stars with human figures representing hours. Each star rises at a specific time of night during specific 10-day periods. To read this clock, you matched the date with the corresponding row, then identified which star was rising. The complexity is remarkable. 36 different decan stars, 12 months, variable star positions. The art contained a working astronomical instrument. The pictures were not just pretty. They were functional tools for measuring cosmic time. The Book of the Dead includes a section called the Book of the Heavenly Cow. Strange images show a cow whose belly is the sky, held up by smaller gods. Stars dot her underside. This strange picture described the structure of the universe. The sky was not empty space, but a physical body. The stars were not distant suns, but lamps attached to the cosmic cow. This was their physics, their cosmology, their attempt to make sense of observable phenomena using the visual language available to them. Zodiac carvings appeared later in Egyptian history, influenced by Babylonian and Greek astronomy. The famous Dendera zodiac shows all 12 constellation symbols arranged in a circle. The figures are part Egyptian, part Greek. This artistic fusion reveals cultural exchange. The Egyptians saw value in foreign star knowledge and incorporated it into their own visual vocabulary. The picture shows the universal tendency of humans to organize stars into meaningful patterns, even if different cultures see different shapes in the same lights. Boats appear constantly in Egyptian celestial art. The sun god's boat, the moon god's boat, the boat of the stars, the deceased person's boat. The Egyptians, living along a river, understood that travel meant boats. When they imagined cosmic travel, they pictured boats sailing through the darkness. The artistic motif reflects lived experience transformed into cosmic architecture. The sky was a river, stars were ports. Death was a voyage to a distant destination you reached by boat if you knew the route. Protective imagery filled tomb walls. The Wedjat eye, the eye of Horus, appeared above doorways. This symbol represented the moon and its phases. It also functioned as a fraction system for mathematics. But in tomb art, it served as protection. The eye watched over the deceased, guarding against evil spirits and incorrect star navigation. Similarly, images of specific stars or constellations were painted to guide and protect. The pictures were both map and talisman, information and magic combined. Perhaps the most haunting images show the weighing of the heart ceremony. The deceased stands before Osiris, Lord of the Stars. Anubis weighs the person's heart against a feather of truth. If the heart is light, the person proceeds to the afterlife among the stars. If heavy with sin, a monster devours it. The stars in the background watch the judgment. This image reveals the ultimate fear. Not just physical death, but cosmic rejection. The terror of being found unworthy to join the eternal patterns above. The darkness that surrounded the bright stars was not just space. It was oblivion for those who failed the test. Every picture of stars implied the surrounding darkness for those who did not qualify for celestial residence. Today we have telescopes that can see billions of light years into space. We have computers that calculate planetary positions centuries into the future. We have sent machines to other planets. Our understanding of the cosmos would seem like pure magic to ancient Egyptians. Yet, when modern scientists study ancient Egyptian astronomy, they find sophisticated knowledge. The gap between ancient and modern is not as wide as we might think. The Egyptians saw much of what we see. They simply explained it differently. Modern archaeoastronomy is the study of how ancient peoples understood the sky. Researchers use computer programs to recreate what the night sky looked like thousands of years ago. They can see exactly which stars were visible from specific locations on specific dates in ancient times. When they apply this to Egyptian sites, they confirm the ancient alignments were intentional and accurate. The Egyptians really were observing and recording celestial phenomena with remarkable precision given their limited tools. Satellite imagery has revealed more Egyptian temples than anyone knew existed. Many are buried beneath sand or hidden under modern buildings. When archaeologists excavate these newly discovered sites, they check the orientations. Again and again, they find astronomical alignments. One temple faces the winter solstice sunset. Another aligns with a specific star's heliacal rising. The pattern is consistent. Egyptian sacred architecture always connected to the sky. Every discovery adds more evidence that celestial observation was central to their entire civilization. Scientists have studied the star shafts in the Great Pyramid using robots. Small wheeled cameras traveled up the narrow passages where no human can fit. At the end of one shaft, they found a mysterious stone with copper handles. Beyond it, another chamber. The shaft aimed at Orion in the Pyramid Age. Modern researchers debate what the chamber means, but whatever its purpose, the astronomical alignment is clear. The builders spent tremendous effort to point this passage at a specific star. That star mattered deeply to them, for reasons we may never fully understand. Astronomical software can show us every eclipse visible from Egypt in ancient times. Researchers have matched some of these eclipses to historical events mentioned in Egyptian texts. A solar eclipse during a particular pharaoh's reign, a lunar eclipse on the night of a documented battle. The correlation between celestial events and human history becomes visible. We can see how the sky really did influence ancient decisions and beliefs. The eclipses they feared were real events, not imagined threats. Their terror had an observable cause. Modern Egyptologists have discovered that some pyramid and temple alignments shift over time due to precession. A temple built 4,000 years ago no longer points exactly where it pointed when constructed. The stars have moved from the original alignment. This allows scientists to date monuments by their astronomical orientation. If a temple aligns perfectly with a certain star, and we know precession has shifted that star's position over time, we can calculate when the temple was built. The stars become a dating tool, helping us write a more accurate timeline of Egyptian history. Climate science adds another dimension. Researchers studying ancient climate patterns have found that Egypt experienced significant drought periods. These droughts match times when historical records show political collapse. The Egyptians blamed such disasters on cosmic displeasure. Modern science finds natural climate cycles. But the result was the same. When the rains failed and the Nile flood weakened, civilization suffered. The Egyptians watching for Sirius to predict the flood were observing a real correlation between stellar timing and water levels, even if they misunderstood the mechanism causing both phenomena. Perhaps the most fascinating modern discovery is that some ancient astronomical records are still useful today. Babylonian eclipse records help scientists refine calculations about how Earth's rotation has slowed over millennia. Egyptian records of Sirius sightings provide data about ancient climate. Chinese records of supernovae help astronomers locate stellar remnants. The ancient observations were accurate enough that modern science can use them as data points. The priests of 4,000 years ago were conducting science. They were collecting data, identifying patterns, and building predictive models. They deserve recognition not as primitive mystics, but as the first astronomers, working with dedication and intelligence to understand the cosmic order that both fascinated and frightened them. After thousands of years, modern scholars have decoded much of what the Egyptians feared. The evidence comes from multiple sources: archaeological discoveries, ancient texts, astronomical calculations. When we put all the pieces together, a clear picture emerges. The pharaohs feared specific celestial events that threatened the cosmic order they depended on. Some fears were justified by real phenomena. Others were misunderstandings of natural events. All were genuine terrors that shaped how an entire civilization lived and died. Eclipses topped the list of cosmic horrors. A solar eclipse meant the sun was being attacked, possibly killed. The Egyptians believed the serpent Apep wrapped around Ra's throat, choking the light from existence. Total darkness in the middle of the day violated every natural law. Birds stopped singing. Animals behaved strangely. The temperature dropped. For a few minutes, the boundary between day and night collapsed. If the sun could be defeated during its strongest hour, what hope did mere humans have? Priests performed emergency rituals during eclipses, trying to help Ra defeat his enemy. The terror was existential. Without the sun, all life would end. Lunar eclipses were equally frightening. The moon turning blood red suggested violence in the heavens. Some texts describe demons devouring the moon. Others speak of cosmic battles between good and evil forces. The moon controlled the calendar. If something could damage the moon, the measurement of time itself was threatened. Society depended on accurate calendars for agriculture, festivals, and religious ceremonies. A wounded moon meant potential chaos in all earthly scheduling and planning. The fear was not just mystical, but practical. Comets terrified ancient peoples across many cultures, and Egypt was no exception. These strange stars with tails appeared without warning. They moved through the constellations in ways that regular stars never did. The Egyptians had no framework to explain them. Were they messages, warnings, weapons thrown by angry gods? Historical records link comets to political disasters. A comet appeared before a pharaoh died. Another coincided with a foreign invasion. The correlation seemed obvious. Comets predicted or caused catastrophe. When a bright comet appeared in the sky, people prepared for the worst. The heliacal rising of Sirius carried both hope and fear. When the star returned after its 70-day absence, the Nile should flood. But what if the star returned and the flood did not come? This happened in some years when upstream rainfall failed. The correlation broke down. The cosmic system seemed to malfunction. Priests must have panicked. If Sirius could not be trusted, what other celestial signs might fail? The foundation of their agricultural calendar rested on this one star's reliability. Its occasional failure to predict accurately must have shaken their confidence in the entire stellar order. Planetary conjunctions worried ancient astronomers. When two or more planets appeared very close together in the sky, it seemed significant. Multiple wandering gods gathering in one place must be holding a council. What were they planning? Ancient texts treat major conjunctions as omens, sometimes good omens, often bad ones. The unpredictability added to the fear. You could calculate when a conjunction would happen, but you could not know what it meant until earthly events revealed the divine intention. The waiting period between observation and interpretation filled people with anxiety. The most sophisticated fear was about precession. Some scholars believe advanced Egyptian priests noticed that the north celestial pole was slowly shifting. Thuban was no longer perfectly aligned with the pyramids after 1,000 years. This should have been impossible. The imperishable stars were supposed to be eternal and unchanging. If even they moved over long periods, then nothing was permanent. The cosmic order itself was temporary. This was the deepest terror. Not just that bad things might happen, but that the entire structure of heaven was unstable. Everything they had built their civilization on was gradually changing beneath them, like sand shifting under a foundation. There was one more revelation. Egyptian texts speak of times when the sun did not rise. Modern scholars initially thought this was poetic exaggeration, but volcanic eruptions can inject so much ash into the atmosphere that the sun barely penetrates for days or weeks. This has happened in recorded history. If it happened in ancient Egypt, the trauma would be unbearable. The ultimate fear realized, the sun defeated, darkness winning. Such an event would explain the desperate celestial focus in Egyptian culture. Once you have experienced the sun failing, you never stop watching the sky with fear that it might fail again. Stand in the desert at night, far from any city lights. Look up. The Milky Way spreads across the sky like a river of light. Thousands of stars shine with perfect clarity. The view overwhelms. Now imagine you have never heard of gravity, nuclear fusion, or light years. You have no scientific framework. You see only the lights and their patterns. What would you think? What would you feel? This was the Egyptian experience every single night. The sheer number of stars must have been humbling. Modern people in cities rarely see more than a few dozen stars. Light pollution hides the full sky. But in ancient Egypt, thousands were visible, each one a mystery, each one potentially important. The Egyptians tried to name them, map them, understand their relationships, but the task was impossibly large. For every star they identified, hundreds more remained nameless points of light in the enormous cosmic crowd. The darkness between the stars frightened them perhaps more than the stars themselves. The lights occupied only tiny points. Most of the sky was black emptiness. What lived in that darkness? Egyptian texts speak of demons and dangerous spirits inhabiting the regions between constellations. The journey to the afterlife required passing through these dark spaces. You needed spells, passwords, and protective amulets to survive the crossing. The darkness was not empty. It was full of threats invisible to living eyes, but deadly to souls attempting the celestial voyage. The stars seemed eternal, but human life was brief. A person might watch the sky for 70 years if they lived a long life. They would see the same patterns repeat. The stars seemed unchanging across that human lifetime. But this created a painful contrast. People died. Loved ones disappeared into the ground. Memories faded. But the stars continued their perfect dance, indifferent to human suffering. The eternal stars witnessed temporary human existence, like gods watching insects. The psychological impact of this comparison must have been profound. Yet the Egyptians found hope in the cosmic mystery. If the stars were eternal, perhaps humans could become eternal too. This was the core of their afterlife belief. Death was not an end, but a transformation. The soul would leave its temporary flesh and travel to the stars to join the eternal patterns. The deceased became stars themselves, watching over descendants forever. Tombs were filled with star maps to guide this journey. Death was terrifying, but it was also graduation to a higher, permanent existence among the celestial community. The planets added another layer of mystery. These wandering stars moved in complex patterns. They sometimes appeared to reverse direction, moving backward through the constellations before resuming forward motion. How could this be explained without understanding orbital mechanics? The Egyptians saw personality in these wandering lights. Each planet was a god traveling on divine business. Their complex paths suggested cosmic politics, relationships, conflicts, and alliances. The mystery was not just scientific, but deeply personal. What were the gods doing up there? What were they planning? The cosmic scale boggled ancient minds, just as it boggles modern ones. How far away were the stars? How big was the universe? Egyptian texts show they pondered these questions. Some suggested the stars were distant lamps on a solid dome. Others proposed an infinite ocean of darkness with islands of light. They had no way to measure cosmic distances, so they could only speculate. But the speculation itself shows sophisticated thinking. They recognized that understanding the universe's structure mattered for understanding their place in it. Perhaps the deepest mystery was consciousness itself. The Egyptians believed the cosmos was aware. The stars watched. The gods had intentions. The universe responded to human actions through blessings or punishments. This was not primitive superstition, but a philosophical position. If humans are conscious, and humans are made of the same material as stars, we now know this is literally true, we are made of stardust, then why wouldn't stars be conscious? The idea of a living, aware cosmos feels strange to modern scientific thinking, but it was a reasonable conclusion from ancient observations. The cosmic mystery included the question of cosmic mind, and that question remains partially unanswered even with our telescopes and equations. The Egyptians noticed something that modern historians confirm. History repeats. Not exactly, but in patterns. Kingdoms rise with confidence and strong leadership. They build monuments. They conquer neighbors. Then, slowly or suddenly, they decline. Weakness spreads. Enemies invade. The kingdom fragments. After a dark period, a new kingdom rises, and the cycle begins again. The Egyptians saw this pattern in their own history, and they connected it to celestial cycles. The sky moved in circles. The sun travelled its daily circle from east to west. The moon completed its monthly circle through phases. The stars made their yearly circle through the season. Even the very slow circle of precession became apparent to those who watched carefully enough across generations. If the heavens moved in cycles, perhaps earthly affairs followed the same circular pattern. This was not just mysticism. It was an attempt to find order in history by connecting it to observable cosmic order. The Sothic cycle was the most important historical cycle the Egyptians tracked. Remember that their calendar had 365 days, but the true solar year is 365 and 1/4 days. This small difference accumulated. After 1460 years, the calendar drifted a full year out of alignment with the seasons, then returned to perfect alignment. The Egyptians called this a Sothic cycle because they measured it using Sirius, the star they called Sopdet or Sothis. When the cycle completed, they marked it as a cosmic renewal, a chance to start fresh with the calendar, and seasons perfectly matched again. Political cycles seemed to match celestial timing. The Old Kingdom lasted roughly 500 years before collapsing. The Middle Kingdom also lasted roughly 500 years. The New Kingdom followed a similar pattern. These were not exact matches, but the rough similarity suggested to Egyptian minds that kingdoms had natural lifespans connected to larger cosmic rhythms. Modern historians attribute the collapses to practical causes like climate change, invasion, and internal corruption. But the Egyptians saw celestial influence in the timing of these recurring rises and falls. Pharaohs died, and new pharaohs took their place. This personal cycle matched the daily cycle of the sun. The old king was associated with the setting sun. The new king was the rising sun. Coronation ceremonies happened at dawn when possible, symbolically linking the new reign to solar rebirth. The gentle circle of royal succession mirrored the gentle circle of day and night. Death and birth were two halves of one eternal cycle. Kings might die, but kingship was immortal, renewing itself generation after generation, under the eternal watch of the stars. Religious festivals followed the calendar cycles. The same ceremonies repeated annually at the same celestial markers. The Opet festival happened when the Nile flooded. The Sed festival, celebrating a pharaoh's continued reign, happened at regular intervals. New Year occurred when Sirius rose. These repeating festivals created a comforting rhythm. No matter what changes occurred in politics or daily life, the festivals returned like the stars. The circle of religious observance gave people stability in an unstable world. Even disaster followed circular patterns. Droughts came in cycles related to climate patterns. Nile flood levels varied over decades in predictable rhythms. The Egyptians tracked these patterns across generations. They knew that 7 good years might be followed by 7 bad years, like the biblical story, which may have originated from Egyptian observations. Understanding the cycles helped them prepare. Store grain during abundance to survive scarcity. The celestial circles above taught practical lessons about cyclical patterns below. But circles can trap as well as comfort. If history repeats, can you escape the pattern? If kingdoms always fall, can yours be different? The Egyptians struggled with this question. They built their monuments to last forever, trying to break the cycle through sheer permanence. They aligned their buildings with eternal stars, seeking to lock their civilization into the unchanging cosmic order. But the circles continued. Kingdoms fell. Monuments crumbled. The gentle circles of history proved stronger than human will. The same celestial patterns that brought comfort through predictability also brought despair through inevitability. The stars that promised eternal order also demonstrated that human order was always temporary, always destined to fade and return and fade again in the slow cosmic dance that predated humanity and would continue long after the last Egyptian turned to dust beneath the circling stars. The Egyptians did not write everything down for everyone to see. Some knowledge was too powerful, too dangerous, too sacred. The priests kept secrets, hidden texts. Special teachings passed only to initiated members. These were the mystery traditions, the doors to knowledge that most people never entered. What little we know about these secrets comes from fragments, hints, and later Greek accounts of Egyptian wisdom. The mystery deepens when we realize much was deliberately destroyed or lost forever. The pyramid texts are the oldest religious writings in human history. They were carved inside the pyramids of the later Old Kingdom, around 2,300 years before the Common Era. These texts were not meant for public reading. They were sealed inside royal tombs, written on walls that no living person would see. They contain spells, prayers, and instructions for the dead pharaoh's journey to the stars. The language is strange, full of references to stellar navigation, transformation spells, and cosmic geography that scholars still debate. One section describes the deceased pharaoh climbing a ladder to heaven. But this is not an ordinary ladder. It is made of the bones of gods. The pharaoh must step on divine bodies to reach the stars. This violent imagery shocks modern readers, but it reveals something about Egyptian cosmic theology. The journey to immortality was not gentle. It required power, even violence. The pharaoh had to overcome resistance to force his way into the eternal realm. The hidden texts showed a more aggressive relationship with the cosmos than the public art suggested. The coffin texts came next, during the Middle Kingdom. These were painted inside coffins of wealthy people, not just pharaohs. The knowledge was spreading downward through society. The texts include more detailed maps of the underworld, more spells for protection, and more information about the dangerous journey through darkness. They speak of gates guarded by demons who ask questions. Give the wrong answer, and you cannot pass. The passwords had to be memorized or read from the coffin lid as your soul travelled. Hidden knowledge became necessary survival information for the afterlife. The Book of the Dead is the most famous, though the title is misleading. Egyptians called it the Book of Coming Forth by Day. It contains even more spells, organized into chapters. Different versions exist because individuals customized their copies, including spells relevant to their particular needs and fears. Some versions have beautiful illustrations showing the soul's journey. Others are just text. The book was expensive. Only wealthy people could afford a complete copy. This meant access to knowledge remained limited. The poor faced the afterlife with less information, less protection, and presumably less chance of success. But even these texts were not the deepest secrets. Greek writers who visited Egypt centuries later spoke of more hidden teachings. The Egyptian priests supposedly possessed knowledge about the universe's structure, the nature of time, advanced mathematics, and the relationship between consciousness and matter. Some of this knowledge allegedly came from even earlier sources, perhaps from a legendary priest called Thoth, who invented writing and astronomy. Later, he became confused with the Greek god Hermes, creating the figure of Hermes Trismegistus, thrice great Hermes, supposed author of the Hermetic texts. The Hermetic writings that survive date from much later, from the Greek and Roman periods. They claim to preserve ancient Egyptian wisdom. Whether they actually do is debatable, but they contain cosmological ideas that may reflect genuine Egyptian thought. The universe as a living being, the stars as conscious entities, humanity's potential to ascend to godhood through knowledge. The emphasis on hidden wisdom, accessible only to the initiated. These themes appear in authentic Egyptian texts too, suggesting the Hermetic tradition preserved something real, even if the specific texts are not genuinely ancient. Why keep knowledge secret? Several reasons. First, power. If you know how to predict the flood and others don't, you have authority. Second, safety. If cosmic knowledge is dangerous, restricting access protects people from harmful mistakes. Third, sacred exclusivity. Not everyone deserves divine knowledge. You must prove yourself worthy through years of study and initiation. Fourth, practical limits. Training someone in complex astronomy takes time. You can only teach a few students. The knowledge naturally remains rare. The hidden doors stayed closed, not just from deliberate secrecy, but from the difficulty of transmission. Some knowledge died with its keepers, doors locked forever, when the last priest who held the key passed through death's final door without passing the secret onward. We have climbed together through 19 chapters. We have seen the Egyptians watch the sky with wonder and terror. We have learned what they built, what they believed, and what they feared. Now we reach the summit, the highest point of understanding. Here, at the peak, we can finally name the deepest fear that haunted the pharaohs when they gazed at the stars. It was not eclipses, though those frightened them, not comets, though those brought dread. The ultimate fear was more subtle and more profound. They feared the precession of the equinoxes. This is the slow wobble of Earth's axis over a period of 25,772 years. From a human perspective, it manifests as the gradual shift of which star marks the north celestial pole, and which constellations the sun passes through at the spring equinox. The movement is so slow that you cannot see it in a single lifetime, but over centuries it becomes undeniable. The eternal patterns were not eternal. The cosmic order was changing. Imagine you have built your entire civilization on the belief that the stars are fixed, permanent, and reliable. Your temples align with specific stars. Your pyramids point to eternal north. Your calendar marks the year by the sun's position against certain constellations. Your religion teaches that these patterns will last forever. Then, slowly, you realize the patterns are shifting. The North Star is not where your great-great-grandfather said it was. The spring equinox no longer occurs when the sun enters the same constellation it entered 1,000 years ago. This was not like a disaster you could pray away or a battle you could fight. This was change at the deepest level of cosmic architecture. If even the stars move, what is permanent? If the cosmic order transforms, what is truly eternal? Every monument the Egyptians built tried to lock in the current sky configuration, to make permanent what was actually temporary. The pyramids aligned with Thuban, but Thuban stopped being the pole star. The monuments became time capsules showing what once was, not what eternally is. Some scholars believe the Egyptians understood this, and it drove them to build even more obsessively. If cosmic time moved in a great circle of 26,000 years, perhaps their monuments could last that full cycle. Perhaps by building massively enough, they could persist through the entire great year and still stand when the stars returned to their original positions. The pyramids were not just tombs, they were defiance. A declaration that human achievement could endure as long as cosmic cycles. Stone competing with stars for permanence. But defiance comes from fear. You defy what threatens you. The threat was time itself, revealed through stellar motion. The same stars that comforted with their reliability, also terrified with their slow betrayal. They seemed eternal, but were not. They taught the terrible lesson that nothing human or cosmic escapes transformation. The Pharaohs, who claimed to be gods, who presented themselves as eternal and unchanging like the stars, faced the uncomfortable truth that even gods must eventually acknowledge change. At this peaceful summit, we can be gentle with their fear. They had no telescopes to see other galaxies, no physics to understand that change and motion are fundamental to existence, no philosophy of evolution to make peace with transformation. They wanted permanence in an impermanent universe. They needed reliability in a cosmos that only offers cycles and change. Their fear was the human fear of mortality expanded to cosmic scale. If everything changes, even the heavens, then death is not just personal, but universal. Everything that is will someday be something else. Yet in their fear, they created something that partially achieved their goal. The pyramids still stand. Their names are still spoken. Their star knowledge still teaches us across the gulf of 4,500 years. They did not achieve literal immortality among the stars, but they achieved something nearly as impressive. They built monuments and created knowledge that outlasted dozens of empires, hundreds of rulers, thousands of changes in the cosmic order they feared so deeply. They feared impermanence and responded by creating the most permanent structures humans have ever made. In that response, despite the fear, despite the impossibility of their goal, they found a kind of victory. The stars shifted, the kingdoms fell, but the pyramids remember, and we remember them. That is its own form of eternity, different from what they hoped for, but real nonetheless. A gentle summit where we can honor their fear and celebrate their response to it. We have travelled far together through the darkness. 20 chapters, thousands of years, millions of stars watched by eyes now turned to dust. Let us rest here at the end and gather what we have learned. The soft answers come gently, like evening light fading into comfortable night. The pharaohs feared time. They feared change. They feared being forgotten by the cosmos itself when the eternal patterns they trusted slowly drifted out of alignment. Their fear was beautiful in its way. It came from paying attention. They watched carefully enough and long enough to see what most people miss. The universe is not static. Nothing stays exactly as it is. Even stars, which seem eternal from our brief perspective, move through slow dances that reveal themselves only across generations. The Egyptians noticed, and noticing brought both wisdom and terror. The more they understood, the more they realized how little control they had over cosmic time. But fear did not make them passive. Look what they built. Pyramids that have stood for 4,500 years. Temples so precisely aligned that modern engineers struggle to match their accuracy with advanced tools. texts carved in stone that still teach us about their beliefs and observations. They faced cosmic impermanence by creating the most permanent structures human civilization has ever achieved. They could not stop the stars from shifting, but they could build monuments that would outlast almost everything else. They turned fear into beauty. The same terror of cosmic change that might have paralyzed them instead motivated breathtaking art. The goddess Nut arched across temple ceilings, her star-covered body protecting the dead. The golden models of the cosmos buried with pharaohs. The intricate star clocks guiding souls through darkness. Every piece of art was both beautiful and functional. They created beauty not despite their fear, but because of it. Art became their way of negotiating with eternity. They were wrong about some things. The stars are not gods. Eclipses are not serpents attacking the sun. Comets are not messages about political events. Modern science gives us better explanations for these phenomena, but they were right about the important things. The cosmos does affect human life. The patterns above do connect to patterns below. Watching carefully and recording observations leads to useful knowledge. They were scientists working with the tools they had, asking the same questions we still ask about our place in the universe. What remains of ancient Egypt? The monuments, yes. The texts and artifacts in museums, but something else too. The questions they asked are our questions. Why are we here? What happens when we die? What is our relationship to the vast cosmos that surrounds us? How do we find meaning in the face of time that stretches beyond human comprehension? 4,000 years separate us from the pyramid builders, but these questions have not changed. We still look up at night and wonder. We still feel small beneath the stars. We still want to believe our existence matters in the cosmic scheme. The modern world has largely stopped watching the sky. City lights hide most stars. We live disconnected from celestial patterns our ancestors knew intimately. We no longer time our lives by stellar motions. Perhaps we have lost something important in this disconnection. The Egyptians, for all their fears, lived in direct relationship with the cosmos. They were aware of the universe in ways we rarely are. Every harvest, every ceremony, every important decision connected to observable patterns in the sky. They participated in cosmic time instead of merely enduring it. Maybe that is the final, soft answer. The pharaohs feared the stars, yes, but they also loved them. They studied them with dedication spanning thousands of years. They incorporated cosmic awareness into every aspect of life and death. Their fear came from caring deeply about their relationship with the universe. And caring deeply, even when it brings fear, is better than indifference. They refused to ignore the cosmos. They insisted on paying attention, on finding meaning in stellar patterns, on connecting human life to something larger and more enduring than brief earthly existence. In that refusal to look away, in that determined gaze upward into mystery, they achieved a kind of cosmic participation we have largely forgotten. But one question remains, doesn't it? Soft and persistent, like starlight reaching across empty space. The Egyptians asked it every night when they looked up. We can ask it too, here at the end, as you prepare for sleep. The pyramids point upwards still. The stars continue their slow, patient movements, and somewhere between earth and heaven, the question waits. Are we alone? In all that vast darkness, among all those distant lights, is humanity the only consciousness looking back? The Egyptians believed the stars were watching them. Perhaps they still are. Or perhaps we are the universe's way of watching itself, tiny points of awareness scattered across time and space, looking up at our larger self with wonder, terror, and love. Either way, the cosmos holds us gently tonight, just as it held the pharaohs in their sleep 4,000 years ago. Rest now. The stars keep watch. They always have. Breathe deep now. Feel the weight of centuries lift from your shoulders. The pharaohs gazed at the same stars you see tonight, or would see if you stepped outside beneath a clear sky. They built monuments that whisper across time. Their fear became beauty. Their questions became pyramids. And those questions are still yours to hold. If this journey brought you peace, share it with a friend who needs rest. Let them drift through history beside you. Subscribe to History for the Tired for more gentle explorations through time. Tomorrow will come with its demands and noise. But for now, you have walked with ancient kings beneath eternal stars. You have touched the same mysteries they pondered. The past is patient. It will wait for you to return. For now, simply rest. Let the soft voice of history carry you into dreams where pyramids touch heaven and stars speak in languages older than words. The pharaohs would understand this need for peace. They built their monuments partly for this, to create beauty that could comfort souls thousands of years in the future. Tonight, you are that future soul they hoped to reach. Sleep well, traveller. You are held by the same cosmos that held them. So what did the pharaohs fear when they looked at the stars? They feared the ending of cycles. They feared cosmic change. They feared time's slow erosion of everything they built. But most of all, they feared being lost in the darkness, forgotten by earth and heaven alike. Yet here we are, thousands of years later, speaking their names, remembering their wonder, following their gaze upward. Perhaps they were not lost after all. The stars continue their ancient dance, unchanged in appearance, though slowly shifting in position. The Nile still flows through Egypt, carrying water and memory. And somewhere in the desert, stone monuments catch moonlight exactly as their builders intended all those centuries ago. Close your eyes now. Let the mystery rest. Let the stars keep their eternal watch while you drift into peaceful sleep. You have learned what the pharaohs knew, that we are small beneath vast heavens, but our questions and our creations can reach toward eternity. You have touched the same fears they felt and seen how they transform terror into beauty. That transformation is their gift to you across 4,500 years. Accept it, rest in it. The pharaohs would understand this need for sleep. They knew that consciousness, that precious spark of awareness, needs rest to renew itself. Even in their afterlife beliefs, the soul had to journey through night before reaching dawn among the stars. So too must you journey through the gentle darkness of sleep before waking to your next day. The pattern is cosmic. The cycle is sacred. Sleep is not weakness, but participation in the universal rhythm of rest and renewal that moves the stars themselves. Sweet dreams, traveller. The cosmos holds you gently tonight, just as it held those ancient builders who looked up with wonder and fear and hope. Their monuments remain, their questions endure, and you, by learning their story, have become part of it. You carry their wonder forward into the future they could not imagine, but somehow knew would come. The pyramids remember, the stars witness, and you, resting now, connect past to future in the eternal present of consciousness beneath the wheeling heavens. Sleep well, the stars keep watch. They always have, they always will.